In the second round of WWE cuts in as many months, 12 NXT talents that we know of were released on Friday, the Dirty Dozen. And they include Olympic gold medalist Gable Steveson. He is gone. Drew Gulak, who spent 7 years with the company, is gone. Boa is gone. He actually spent longer in WWE than Gulak did, if you can believe it, because he never made the main roster. Boa signed with them in 2016. Valentina Feroz, who had been with NXT since 2019. Ezekiel Balagoon, Julian Baldy, Trey Bearhill, Emma Diaz, Keyshawn LaFleur, Daryl Mason, Vlad Pavlenko, and Kia Saint are all gone from WWE. Now, I know you hear most of those names and you're like, who? That was my reaction to about 90% of that list. But a lot of those names never even worked a match. Yeah, they were apparently part of this next-gen show that was airing on the Roku channel that they had that I didn't even know about until recently. The Gable Steveson cut was announced by Dave Meltzer, and it has since been confirmed by some other outlets. Steveson, he won Olympic gold in the 2021 Games in Tokyo, and he was a very accomplished amateur wrestler, but that doesn't always necessarily translate well to pro wrestling. I mean, not everybody can be Kurt Angle. But WWE signed him because, gold medalist, they signed him to a big money contract with the idea that he could continue to wrestle amateur while making the occasional appearance on WWE television. And he was even drafted to Raw. He was drafted to Monday Night Raw 3 years ago. That was a Vince McMahon thing. Let's draft him to Raw and start the hype machine. But sometimes you can be all hype and no substance. He was drafted to Raw. He never made a single appearance on the show. The biggest thing he did was give Chad Gable an overhead belly-to-belly suplex at WrestleMania 38. They gave him a WrestleMania moment. That was supposed to be the kickoff for him, but he wasn't ready yet. So they sent him to NXT instead. That was last year. He worked a match against Baron Corbin. Remember this wonderful brief run that Gable Steveson had in NXT where he got booed, even though he was not supposed to be a heel. He got booed, and he had that god-awful match with Baron Corbin. Oh my God, that crowd absolutely massacred him. And he was supposed to be the babyface. But he had negative charisma, and he just wasn't very good. Now, of late, they had brought him in for some dark matches at the tapings. They tried him out as a babyface. They tried him out as a heel. He clearly was not all that he was cracked up to be. They gave him every opportunity, more than most, and it did not work. He was a total bust. His brother, who is Damon Kemp in NXT, he seems to have it in a way that Gable does not. And the Observer report says that he had 1 year of eligibility left in college. He wanted to wrestle in the Big Ten and NCAA tournament last year. WWE said no, they wouldn't allow it. He would have needed their permission because he was under contract to them and he was being paid by them. But they did let him wrestle in the US Open Championships, and not having competed for almost 2 years, he dominated. He earned a spot on the US team for the World Championships. WWE would not let him compete. Even though they let him compete to qualify for the team, they would not let him compete. But the real kick in the balls is that if WWE would have cut him a few weeks before, he could have competed in the Olympic trials, and he would have been the favorite to win a gold medal or a silver medal in the Olympics this summer. But now it's too late for him to make the team. So they would not let him compete even if he wanted to, but then they fired him anyway, and now it's too late. Smacked in the face and kicked in the dick, just to add insult to injury. Well, that's life. A lot of people were very upset that he was employed there in the first place, given the rape allegation against him when he was still in college. I don't want to get into all the gory details because it's not even relevant at this point now that he's gone, but he ended up not facing charges, largely because there was a legal loophole in the state of Minnesota that had to do with a person's capacity to give consent when they were intoxicated. They had lawmakers in the state close the loophole right after that case because as it read, I remember reading about it at the time and it was ridiculous. It's like, how is this even the law in this state? So they quickly closed the loophole after this because so many people were appalled by it. I don't recall if there was enough evidence even without that loophole to charge him with a crime. It's been a while since I've read through all the details. I don't know what he did or did not do. I mean, it didn't sound good, but there aren't going to be a lot of people shedding tears for this man. Let's just put it that way. I just didn't think he was very good. You know, someone asked me, who is a bigger bust? Gable Steveson in WWE or Paige Van Zandt in AEW? It's Gable Steveson. I mean, by far, it's not even close. Do you realize all of the money and all of the time that they invested in this guy? AEW brought Paige Van Zandt in for a handful of appearances. She was going to start training at Gangrel School, and then she never showed up because she was never serious about wrestling in the first place. And yet AEW still has her listed on their roster page. But there's no comparison. All the fanfare around Steveson signing with them, being an Olympic gold medalist, and then being drafted to Raw, and his one WrestleMania appearance. This man is the biggest flop in WWE history. Now, he's only 23 years old. He could always come back to wrestling, later on at some point. WWE may give him a second chance. Maybe he ends up going into MMA. I don't know what his plans are. Frankly, I don't really care. Just seems to me like this pro wrestling thing is not for him. Then there's Drew Gulak. Gulak is one of the longest tenured names from that list of cuts and the most well-known as far as on-air personalities. He's a former cruiserweight champion. His release comes after Ronda Rousey recently accused him of pulling on the string of her sweatpants backstage at a WWE event. And after she made the accusation, Gulak posted a statement on Twitter shortly after, basically verifying that the incident happened, but just not in the way that she said. He said, this would have been about a month ago, he said, backstage at a WWE event in 2022, I saw Ronda talking with a group in the hallway. I stopped to say hi and shake all their hands, and in an attempt to shake her hand, I accidentally touched her drawstring. Complete accident, and one that I had apologized to her for the mishap. Gulak was pulled from NXT television after Ronda went public with her story. He had been a member of the No Quarter Catch crew. WWE was said to have investigated Ronda's claims and interviewed people backstage about the incident. They never publicized the results of that investigation, but considering he was pulled from TV and written off with Tony D'Angelo and his crew, implying that he was, quote, taken care of, that didn't sound very promising. The last time they implied that somebody was sleeping with the fishes, that person ended up in AEW. So whatever they found must not have been good. Ronda says that he yanked on her drawstring. Gulak says, oh no, I accidentally touched it when I went to go shake her hand. I have shaken a lot of hands in my years on this earth. I have never once touched someone below the belt in trying to do so. I don't know what kind of handshake he was going for, but it was a very costly one. Triple H at the Backlash press conference after the show yesterday was asked about Gulak's departure. He claimed it was not a release. They just did not renew his contract. They just let it expire, and they didn't give him a new one. He never answered the second part of the reporter's question about whether it had to do with Ronda's claims. But why else would they let his contract expire when he was leading his own group on TV? And he had been with the company for so many years. He had been a trusted member of the roster, trusted enough that they looked to him to help train people like Logan Paul and Bad Bunny for their matches. You don't have to be a genius to figure out that the Ronda Rousey stuff very likely had something to do with them not renewing this man's deal and wanting to distance themselves from him. But they have not actually said that to be the case. So I want to mention that. They have not confirmed that. They have not intimated that. They have not verified that officially. But you don't need to be a rocket scientist to look at the timeline here and put two and two together. And Triple H, by the way, in that press conference, when he was asked that question, he took a very weird shot at PW Insider and Fightful, telling the person who asked the question that, well, if you're going to cite sources, you should cite ones that are credible. Of all the news outlets in the wrestling community to take shots at not being credible, PW Insider and Fightful would not be at the top of that list. I thought that was a very stupid thing for him to say. Hey, look, nobody's perfect. That doesn't mean every story that they report or break is going to be accurate all the time. I will trust, though, what Mike or Sean say over most other people. So I think that was uncalled for. As far as the rest of the cuts are concerned, Mike Johnson says the cuts were primarily made due to the lack of current creative plans. These were talents that were not being utilized. They had no plans for them anytime in the near future. I look at that list. Outside of Boa and Valentina Feroz, I don't know who any of these people are. Like I said, a lot of them were apparently featured on their Next Gen series that was airing on the Roku channel. I couldn't pick these people out of a lineup with a gun to my head. But I'm sorry they lost their job. But in NXT, there is going to be a lot of turnover. If you're a talent that is not progressing quickly enough, or if they don't have any plans on doing anything with you, you are not going to be around for very long. The turnover down there, even more than the main roster, is rapid. And it really should not be a surprise to anybody. When you look at these lists and you say 80, 90% of the names, I don't know who this person is. I don't know who that person is. That's the way it works. They're always signing these kids out of high school and college. They're bringing in these sports athletes. They're bringing them in to see if they can mold them and shape them into something for the future. Usually within 6 months, they have it figured out. Okay, we can use them or this ain't going to work. And that's when you get this kind of wave of releases like this. So I can't say any of this was really surprising.